A young pastor sat in a restaurant enjoying his lunch. As he ate, he opened a letter from his mother which had arrived that morning. When he unfolded it, a $20 bill fluttered onto the table. "Thanks, Mom," he thought. "I really needed this right now." As he finished his meal, he noticed a beggar leaning against a lamppost outside. The man looked down on his luck, and the pastor felt a tug at his heart. He hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. Pulling the envelope back out, he crossed out the names and in large letters wrote, "Persevere." Without drawing attention to himself, he tucked the bill back inside, placed the envelope under his arm, and casually dropped it as he walked past the man. The beggar picked it up, read the message, and smiled. The next day, as the pastor sat down for another meal, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he saw the same man grinning and holding out a thick wad of cash. Bewildered, the pastor asked, "What's this?" The man chuckled. "You're half of the winnings. Persevere came in first in the 4th race at the track yesterday, paid 30-1. A very attractive nurse was working a hectic schedule of double shifts all week, so she didn't really have time to do laundry. She had no clean underwear, so she just figured she'd throw on some scrubs and head to work. Her shift that day was a nightmare. She lost 3 elderly patients while she was in the room cleaning. She took a short break to mourn, then headed to care for another, slightly younger patient. As she was walking to his room, she pleaded to God, "Please don't take this one too." She walked into the room and noticed that one of his socks was on the floor. She bent down to pick it up, and all of a sudden she heard the heart monitor beep loudly and freaked. She looked at him and said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yes, I'm fine, but I think you should know your scrubs have a hole in them." A woman walks into a diner carrying a dog under her arm. She puts the dog on the counter and announces that the dog can talk. The woman says she has $100 she's willing to bet anyone who says he can't. The head cook quickly takes the bet and asks the dog, "What's the thing on top of this building that keeps rain out?" The dog answers, "Roof." The cook says, "Who are you kidding? I'm not paying." The dog's owner says, "Double or nothing, and I'll ask him something else." The cook agrees, and the owner turns to the dog and asks, "Who was the greatest baseball player of all time?" The dog answers with a muffled, "Ruth." With that, the cook picks both of them up and tosses them out onto the street. As they bounce on the sidewalk in front of the diner, the dog looks at his owner and says, "DiMaggio?" The owner of a seafood restaurant sends one of his sons undercover to his rival's restaurant. The owner tells him to get a job as a cook and figure out the recipe for his rival's famous clam chowder. The first day, the son comes home with a basic list of ingredients that the rival uses. They try making it, but it doesn't turn out the same. The owner sends him back. The second day, the son comes home, having watched the rival chef prepare the chowder. They try again to make it, and it's close, but the consistency is off. It's too watery. They try to figure out what they're doing wrong, and the son realizes that he was distracted for a minute while the chef did something. He must have added a secret ingredient, one not on the list, while you looked away, concludes the owner. He sends his son back for a third day, this time telling him not to take his eyes off the chef for a second. The son comes back the next day excited. "You'll never believe what I saw," he says. "He did have a secret ingredient. It's a piece of paper." "A piece of paper?" "Yeah, he keeps a stack of printed paper in the kitchen. It's a bunch of Wikipedia articles he's printed out, of various movies. When he makes the chowder, he tears out the synopsis of a movie from one of the articles and puts it in. It's the strangest thing, but that's the secret ingredient." "Ah," says the owner, "the plot thickens." A sign on a restaurant window says, "If you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win $1 million. A man walking by notices the sign and walks in the restaurant and sits down at the table with a smirk on his face. The waiter asks what he will be having, and the man says, "I will have white rhinoceros stew, please." The waiter comes out with a boiling hot bowl of exactly what the man ordered. The man is taken by surprise, but he eats the stew and pays for his very expensive meal. He leaves angrily. The next day, he comes back and sits at the table with a smirk on his face again. He tells the waiter, "Today I will have bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat." The waiter leaves and quickly comes back after a few minutes with exactly what the man ordered. The man, surprised again, eats his meal, angrily pays and leaves. The next day he comes back and sits at the table and tells the waiter, "Today I will have a lactating mermaid breast sandwich." A few minutes go by and the waiter comes out holding 2 massive duffel bags with the $1 million. The man, overcome with excitement, says, "I knew it! You don't have mermaid breasts!" The waiter tells him politely, "We actually have it, sir. It's just that we ran out of bread." A man is driving down the street and sees a penguin on the side of the road. Curious, he decides to pull over and pick it up. About that time, a local police officer sees the two of them and decides to pull behind him as he's loading the penguin up. "Just what do you think you're doing with that penguin?" The officer demands. "I haven't a clue what to do with him. I just saw him on the side of the road and figured I'd pick him up." The man replied, "Well, I suggest you take him straight to the zoo," the officer suggested. So the man agrees and takes off heading toward the zoo. The next day, the officer is at his post when he sees the same guy in the same car driving by with the same penguin. He immediately hits the flashers and pulls the man over. "Hey, pal, I thought I made it clear yesterday to take this penguin straight to the zoo," the officer stated. "Yeah, we did that yesterday. Today, I'm taking him to the ball game." Two couples decided to host a friendly dinner party one evening. During the evening, Jim accidentally dropped his napkin under the table. When he bent down to pick it up, he couldn't help but notice that Bob's wife, Sue, wasn't wearing any underwear under her dress. The shocking discovery left Jim flustered, and in his haste to sit back up, he bumped his head on the table, emerging red-faced and awkward. Later, while Jim was helping himself to drinks in the kitchen, Sue walked in and with a sly smile asked, "Did you like what you saw under the table?" Caught off guard, Jim hesitated, but finally admitted, "Well, yes, I did." Sue leaned closer and whispered, "If you want it, it'll cost you $500. Jim was stunned but intrigued. After a brief internal debate, he agreed to her proposition. Sue suggested he come by her house Friday afternoon since Bob would be at work. When Friday rolled around, Jim arrived at Sue's house at 2 p.m. sharp. After handing her the agreed $500, they went to the bedroom and the deal was done. Jim quickly dressed, thanked Sue, and left. That evening, when Bob came home, he casually asked Sue, "Did Jim stop by the house today?" Sue's heart skipped a beat, but she replied, "Why, yes, he did drop by for a little while." Bob nodded and asked, "Did he give you $500? Sue, trying to stay composed, answered, "Well, yes, he did." Bob grinned and said, "Perfect. He stopped by the office this morning and borrowed $500 from me. He promised he'd drop it off at the house today. Glad he kept his word. Now that is what you call playing the long game." Two 90-year-old women, Rose and Barb, had been friends all of their lives. When it was clear that Rose was dying, Barb visited her every day. One day, Barb said, "Rose, we both loved playing women's softball all our lives, and we played all through high school. Please do me one favor. When you get to heaven, somehow you must let me know if there's women's softball there." Rose looked up at Barb from her deathbed and said, "Barb, you've been my best friend for many years. If it's at all possible, I'll do this favor for you." Shortly after that, Rose passed on. At midnight a few nights later, Barb was awakened from a sound sleep by a blinding flash of white light and a voice calling out to her, "Barb, Barb." "Who is it?" asked Barb, sitting up suddenly. "Who is it?" "Barb, it's me, Rose." "You're not Rose. Rose just died. I'm telling you, it's me, Rose," insisted the voice. "Rose, where are you?" "In heaven," replied Rose. "I have some really good news and a little bad news." "Tell me the good news first," said Barb. "The good news," Rose said, "is that there's softball in heaven. Better yet, all of our old buddies who died before us are here too. Better than that, we're all young again. Better still, it's always springtime and it never rains or snows. And best of all, we can play softball all we want and we never get tired." "That's fantastic," said Barb. "It's beyond my wildest dreams. So what's the bad news? You're pitching Tuesday?" One day, Harry came upon a big, long ladder that stretched into the clouds. He'd walk this way every day, and this ladder was never there before. Curious and brave, he began to climb. Eventually, he climbed into the layer of clouds and saw this rather large, homely woman lying there on a cloud. She spoke. "Take me now, or climb the ladder to success." Harry figured success had to be better than this, so he continued climbing. He came upon another level of clouds and found a thinner, cuter woman than before. She also spoke, "Take me now, or climb the ladder to success." Harry saw that his luck was changing and so continued his climb. On another level of clouds, he found a rather attractive woman with not so bad of a figure. She stated, "Take me now, or climb the ladder to success." Harry really liked his advantage now. He climbed quickly and deftly, and sure enough, on the next level, he found a gorgeous, lithe, well-endowed woman lying seductively on the cloud. "Take me now, or climb the ladder to success," she huskily whispered. Harry couldn't believe his eyes, but his greed got the best of him. He climbed to the next level, expecting Aphrodite or something similar. Suddenly, the ladder ends, and a latch closes behind him. He looks over to see a 400-pound, 6'8" hairy, biker-looking guy with tattoos. The biker gets up and walks menacingly toward Harry. Apprehensively, Harry whispers, "Who are you?" The biker answers, "I'm Cess." A daddy hedgehog is teaching his sons how to cross a road. He explains, "If you see a car coming, go to the middle and curl up in a ball. It will pass right over you." He then demonstrates walking across the road, and when a car comes, curling up into a ball and letting it pass safely over the top, and then heading to the other side. He then tells the older son to cross. The older son does the same thing, seeing a car, curling up into a ball, and then getting to the other side once it safely passes over him. He then tells the younger son to cross. The younger son goes across, sees a car, curls up into a ball, and is immediately run over. "What did he do wrong?" the older son asks in shock. "He didn't do anything wrong, son. It's those damn Reliant Robins." I was pulled over while driving the Lamborghini. A female officer approached my driver's door and said the reason she had pulled me over was because my license light bulb was not working. I knew the reason she pulled me over was because she just wanted to run my license and registration to see if I had any warrants or such. I was pretty calm while she went back to her patrol car, and we sat there about 10 minutes before she returned. Well, the big dyke-looking cow hands me a ticket. I was stunned. I asked her how she could ascertain how long my bulb had been out, as it is quite possible the bulb was working when I left the house. If that is a possibility, then how can she write a ticket? She responded that she didn't give a damn when it burned out, as it was not working now. I mentioned that the lights were all functioning when I got a state inspection less than 3 weeks ago. Once again, she said she didn't care. I then asked why I couldn't receive a warning ticket, since this was such a minor offense. She replied that she did not issue warning tickets. Her partner, a male, just shook his head and shrugged. Well, I told her she was being rather less than helpful to a citizen of her fair city. She replied that she didn't need to be helpful to someone that had broken the law. With that, I snapped. I asked her how many tickets she had to write before the department issued her a penis. Her partner burst out laughing. My friend stared at me in disbelief, and the stupid, fat-ass dyke cop just turned and waddled away. I still smile when I recall the look on her face. Of course, she still had the last laugh. The damn ticket cost me $98. The nun teaching Sunday school was speaking to her class one morning, and she asked the question, "When you die and go to heaven, which part of your body goes first?" Susie raised her hand and said, "I think it's your hands." "Why do you think it's your hands, Susie?" Susie replied, "Because when you pray, you hold your hands together in front of you, and God just takes your hands first." "What a wonderful answer," the nun said. Little Johnny raised his hand and said, "Sister, I think it's your feet." The nun looked at him with the strangest look on her face. "Now, Johnny, why do you think it would be your feet?" Little Johnny said, "Well, I walked into Mommy and Daddy's bedroom the other night. Mommy had her legs straight up in the air and she was saying, 'Oh, God, I'm coming!' I have to tell you, if Dad hadn't pinned her down, we'd have lost her." A mother and a baby camel were lying around, and suddenly the baby camel asked, "Mother, may I ask you some questions?" Mother said, "Sure, why, son, is there something bothering you?" Baby said, "Why do camels have humps?" Mother said, "Well, son, we are desert animals. We need the humps to store water, and we are known to survive without water." Baby said, "Okay, then why are our legs long and our feet rounded?" Mother said, "Son, obviously they are meant for walking in the desert. You know, with these legs, I can move around the desert better than anyone does." Baby said, "Okay, then why are our eyelashes long? Sometimes it bothers my sight." Mother, with pride, said, "My son, those long, thick eyelashes are your protective cover. They help to protect your eyes from the desert sand and wind." Baby, after thinking, said, "I see. So the hump is to store water when we are in the desert. The legs are for walking through the desert, and these eyelashes protect my eyes from the desert. Then what in God's name are we doing here in the zoo?" A new guy in town walks into a bar and reads a sign that hangs over the bar. "Free beer! Free beer for the person who can pass the test!" So the guy asks the bartender what the test is. Bartender replies, "Well, first you have to drink that whole gallon of pepper tequila, the whole thing at once, and you can't make a face while doing it. Second, there's a gator out back with a sore tooth. You have to remove it with your bare hands. Third, there's a woman upstairs who's never had an orgasm. You have to make things right for her." The guy says, "Well, as much as I would love free beer, I won't do it. You have to be nuts to drink a gallon of pepper tequila and then get crazier from there." Well, as time goes on and the man drinks a few, he asks, "Where's that tequila?" He grabs the gallon of tequila with both hands and downs it with a big slurp and tears streaming down his face. Next, he staggers out back, and soon all the people inside hear the most frightening roaring and thumping. Then silence. The man staggers back into the bar, his shirt ripped and big scratches all over his body. "Now," he says, "where's that woman with the sore tooth?" A Vaseline sales rep was conducting a survey at a local drugstore, asking women if they used her product. Most were too shy to answer, but a few younger women admitted they used it for certain activities. Then, an older woman walked in with 3 young kids trailing behind her. The rep saw an opportunity and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you and your husband use Vaseline during love?" The woman smiled and said, "Oh, yes, we use it every time we make love." The rep, shocked, asked, "Wow, doesn't that much? You know." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, hell no, we smear it on the doorknob to keep these little monsters from busting in." A well-dressed man walked into a small hotel and politely asked the manager, "Is room 39 available tonight?" The manager checked. "Yes, sir, it's free." "I'd like to reserve it," the man said. "And one more thing. I'll need a black knife, a 39 centimeters piece of white string, and 1 orange, exactly 73 grams. The manager raised an eyebrow, but agreed, curious about the odd request. The man went to his room quietly. He didn't order food, didn't ask for Wi-Fi, and didn't request towels. Nothing. But after midnight, strange noises came from room 39. Wild animal sounds, clanking metal, whispers. It was like a jungle, and a kitchen had collided. The manager stayed up all night, wondering what on earth was going on. But in the morning, when the man checked out, room 39 was spotless. The orange, the knife, and the string were all untouched on the table. A year passed. Same month, same man, same room, same requests. And again, the same bizarre midnight chaos. The manager, now losing sleep and sanity, was determined to get answers. On the 3rd year, when the man came back yet again with the exact same routine, the manager finally asked, "Please, I have to know. What's happening in room 39? I won't tell a soul. I promise." The man leaned in and said, "If I tell you, you must never share it with anyone. Swear it." "I swear," the manager said, heart pounding. And so the man told him the secret. To this day, the manager hasn't told a single person what he heard, and I respect that. A woman was having a daytime affair while her husband was at work. One wet and lusty day, she was in bed with her boyfriend Steve when, to her horror, she heard her husband's car pull into the driveway. "Oh my God, hurry, grab your clothes and jump out the window. My husband's home early." "I can't jump out the window, Tilda. It's raining out there," screamed Steve. "If my husband catches us in here, he'll kill us both," she replied. "He's got a hot temper and a gun, so the rain is the least of your problems." So Steve scoots out of bed, grabs his clothes, and jumps out the window. As he ran down the street in the pouring rain, he quickly discovered he had run right into the middle of the town's annual marathon, so he started running along beside the others, about 300 of them. Being naked, with his clothes tucked under his arm, Steve tried to blend in as best he could. After a little while, a small group of runners who had been watching him with some curiosity jogged closer. "Do you always run in the nude?" one asked. "Oh, yes," Steve replied, gasping for air. "It feels so wonderfully free." Another runner moved alongside. "Do you always run carrying your clothes with you under your arm?" "Oh, yes," Steve answered breathlessly. "That way I can get dressed right at the end of the run and get in my car to go home." Then a third runner cast his eyes a little lower and queried, "Do you always wear a condom when you run?" "Nope, just when it's raining," smiled Steve. A young couple, married just a couple of weeks, returned from their honeymoon to face the beginning of their new lives. The next morning, the husband woke up, showered, dressed, and made his way to the kitchen, where he saw his new wife crying. So the husband inquired, "What's wrong, honey?" "Well, I came down here this morning to surprise you with a big breakfast, but I can't cook or clean." The husband smiled his biggest smile and said, There, sweetie. I don't care that you can't cook and clean. Come on up to the bedroom, and I'll show you what I'd like for breakfast." So off they went to the bedroom. That afternoon, the husband came home for lunch to find his new wife crying again in the kitchen. "What's wrong now, sweetie?" "Well, the same thing as this morning. I came in here to make you something for lunch, and I just can't cook." Again, the husband smiled and said, "Why don't you come back up to the bedroom and I'll have my lunch there?" So off they went to the bedroom again. That evening, the new husband came home, walked in the house, and saw his new bride buck naked, sliding down the banister of the stairs. Up she ran, and whoosh down the banister. After the third trip up the stairs, the puzzled husband asked, "What are you doing, honey?" She replied with a smile, "Warming up your supper." Two guys left the bar after a long night of drinking, jumped in the car, and started it up. After a couple of minutes, an old man appeared in the passenger window and tapped lightly. The passenger screamed, "Look at the window! There's an old ghost's face there!" The driver sped up, but the old man's face stayed in the window. The passenger rolled his window down part way and, scared out of his wits, said, "What do you want?" The old man softly replied, "You got any tobacco?" The passenger handed the old man a cigarette and yelled, "Step on it!" to the driver, rolling up the window in terror. A few minutes later, they calmed down and started laughing again. The driver said, "I don't know what happened, but don't worry, we're doing 80 now." All of a sudden, there was a light tapping on the window, and the old man reappeared. "There he is again!" the passenger yelled. He rolled down the window and shakily said, "Yes? Do you have a light?" the old man quietly asked. The passenger threw a lighter out the window, saying, "Step on it." They were flooring it and going about 100 miles an hour, trying to forget what they had just seen and heard, when all of a sudden there came some more tapping. "Oh my God! He's back!" The passenger rolled down the window and screamed in stark terror, "What now?" The old man gently replied, "You want some help getting out of the mud?" Two couples were playing poker one evening. Steve accidentally dropped some cards on the floor. When he bent down under the table to pick them up, he noticed Bill's wife, Sue, wasn't wearing any underwear under her dress. Shocked by this, Steve, upon trying to sit back up again, hit his head on the table and emerged red-faced. Later, Steve went to the kitchen to get some refreshments. Bill's wife followed and asked, "Did you see anything that you liked under there?" Surprised by her boldness, Steve courageously admitted that, well, indeed, he did. She said, "Well, you can have it, but it will cost you $500. After taking a minute or two to assess the financial and moral costs of this offer, Steve confirms that he is interested. She tells him that since her husband Bill works Friday afternoons and Steve doesn't, Steve should be at her house around 2 p.m. Friday afternoon. When Friday rolled around, Steve showed up at Bill's house at 2 p.m. sharp, and after paying Sue the agreed sum of $500, they went to the bedroom and closed their transaction as agreed. Steve quickly dressed and left. As usual, Bill came home from work at 6 p.m., and upon entering the house, asked his wife abruptly, "Did Steve come by the house this afternoon?" With a lump in her throat, Sue answered, "Why, yes, he did stop by for a few minutes this afternoon." Her heart nearly skipped a beat when her husband curtly asked, "And did he give you $500? In terror, she assumed that somehow he had found out and, after mustering her best poker face, replied, "Well, yes, in fact, he did give me $500. Bill, with a satisfied look on his face, surprised his wife by saying, "Good, I was hoping he did. Steve came by the office this morning and borrowed $500 from me. He promised me he'd stop by our house this afternoon on his way home and pay me back." A cabbie picks up a nun. She gets into the cab, and the cab driver won't stop staring at her. She asks him why he is staring, and he replies, "I have a question to ask you, but I don't want to offend you." She answers, "My dear son, you cannot offend me. When you're as old as I am and have been a nun as long as I have, you get a chance to see and hear just about everything. I'm sure that there's nothing you could say or ask that I would find offensive." "Well, I've always had a fantasy to have a nun kiss me." She responds, "Well, let's see what we can do about that. First, you have to be single, and second, you must be Catholic." The cab driver is very excited and says, "Yes, I am single, and I'm Catholic too." The nun says, "Okay, pull into the next alley." He does, and the nun fulfills his fantasy. But when they get back on the road, the cab driver starts crying. "My dear child," said the nun, "why are you crying?" "Forgive me, sister, but I have sinned. I lied. I must confess. I'm married and I'm Jewish." The nun says, "That's okay. My name is Kevin, and I'm on my way to a Halloween party." The waiter, who is also the owner, walks up to the blind man and hands him a menu. "I'm sorry, sir, but I am blind and I can't read the menu. Just bring me a dirty fork from a previous customer, and I'll order from that." A little confused, the owner walks over to the dirty dish pile and picks up a greasy fork. He returns to the blind man's table and hands it to him. The blind man puts the fork to his nose and takes a deep breath. "Ah, yes, that's what I'll have, meatloaf and mashed potatoes." "Unbelievable," the owner says to himself as he walks towards the kitchen. Mary, the cook, happens to be the owner's wife, and he tells her what just happened. The blind man eats his meal and leaves. The owner thinks the blind man is screwing around with him. He tells his wife that the next time the blind man comes in, he's going to test him. He returns the following week, but this time the owner sees him coming and runs into the kitchen. He tells his wife, "Mary, rub this fork on your panties before I take it to the blind man." Mary complies and hands her husband the fork back. As the blind man walks in and sits down, the owner is ready and waiting. "Good afternoon, sir. This time I remembered you, and I already have the fork ready for you." The blind man puts the fork to his nose, takes a deep whiff, and says, "I didn't know Mary worked here." There's a guy from Ireland driving through Europe and an English guy driving in the opposite direction. In the middle of the night, with no other cars on the road, they hit each other head on, and both cars go flying off in different directions. The Irish fellow manages to climb out of his car and survey the damages. He looks at his twisted car and says, "Jesus, I am really lucky to be alive." Likewise, the Englishman scrambles out of his car and looks at his wreckage. He too says to himself, "I can't believe I survived this wreck." The Englishman walks over to the Irishman and says, "Hey, man, I think this is a sign from God that we should put away our petty differences and live as friends instead of such rivals." The Irishman thinks for a moment and says, "You're absolutely right. We should be friends. Now, I'm going to see what else survived the wreck." So the Irishman pops open his trunk and finds a full, unopened bottle of Paddy Power's Irish whiskey. He says to the English fellow, "I think this is another sign from God that we toast to our newfound understanding and friendship." The Englishman says, "You're damn right," and he grabs the bottle and starts sucking down the Irish whiskey. After putting away nearly half the bottle, the Englishman hands it back to the Irish fella and says, "Your turn." The Irish fella twists the cap back on the bottle and says, "Nah, I think I'll wait for the police to show up." The bartender hands him the beer and says, "I'm not gay, but I want to compliment you on your physique. It really is phenomenal. I have a question, though. Why is your head so small?" The big guy nods slowly. He's obviously fielded this question many times. "One day," he begins, "I was hunting when I got lost in the woods. I heard someone crying for help and finally realized that it was coming from a frog sitting next to a stream. So I picked up the frog and it said, 'Kiss me, and I will turn into a genie and grant you 3 wishes.' So I looked around to make sure I was alone and gave the frog a kiss. Poof! The frog turned into a beautiful, voluptuous, naked woman. She said, 'You now have 3 wishes.' I looked down at my scrawny 115-pound body and said, 'I want a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger.' She nodded, whispered a spell, and poof! There I was, so huge that I ripped out of my clothes and was standing there naked. She then asked, 'What will be your second wish?' I looked hungrily at her beautiful body and replied, 'I want to make sensuous love with you here by this stream.' She nodded, lay down, and beckoned to me. We then made love for hours. Later, as we lay there next to each other, sweating from our glorious lovemaking, she whispered into my ear, 'You know you do have one more wish. What will it be?' I looked at her and replied, 'How about a little head?'